Deep dives and blue skies. Welcome back to Talking Blue with Nick, the best Dodgers analytical podcast that you can find.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Talking Blue, the best Dodgers analytical podcast that you can find. I'm your host, Nick. You are listening to episode 114 of Talking Blue. It is a special edition of Talking Blue today. We are not here to recap any games. We are here to talk about one thing. That's the trade deadline and how it all comes together with the Dodgers. All right, Dodgers trade deadline talk. Trade candidates, all that stuff. We're going to talk about a lot of things today. Prospects, potential trades from the Dodgers. Some players on their roster, actually. Could they sell on a couple pieces, some major league pieces? Turn that into more prospects. Obviously, could they acquire some big pieces, whether it be bullpen, starting pitching, a bat, maybe a backup catcher, all that kind of stuff. We all know the main guy that is, the biggest name out there, Tarik Skubal of the Tigers. We're going to talk about all of that stuff. So, as always, you can get this podcast on Apple Podcast, on Spotify. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of the videos dropping. You can follow us on all social media at Talking Blue Pod. You can follow myself at Nick Talking Ball on X. So, I apologize for everything going on around me. I got a bunch of people moving in and out of this house. So that's why I see a bunch of boxes behind me, a lot of commotion. It's lightning outside of my building. A lot of things are going on. I apologize if you hear any noise, but I am a man of the people, and I wanted to get on here and talk about the Dodgers and the trade deadline, and really a lot of the interesting topics and possibilities that could transpire over the next, It is Thursday at this time. So over the next 4 days or so before the deadline, which is Monday at 6 p.m. I thought it was 3 p.m. Eastern, but it's actually 6 p.m. Monday late afternoon. All right. So what I'm going to do today, again, all trade deadline stuff. The Dodgers are actually currently playing the Seattle Mariners. They played the first two games Tuesday, Wednesday, lost Tuesday night, won Wednesday night. Tuesday was a pretty disappointing game. It was a fun back-and-forth game, a lot of homers. Justin Robleski didn't really pitch that good for the first time in a while. Dodgers hit a lot of home runs as well. Who homered in that game? Max Muncy, I believe. Shohei homered in that game, and I think there was one other homer as well that I'm forgetting. But it was a pretty good game, but ultimately the Dodgers just stranded a lot of runners throughout the game, and especially in the ninth inning, unable to come back. But then they were able to bounce back Wednesday night and win that game. Edwin Diaz got his first save since the month of April. He came off the IL, of course, and Shohei Ohtani had a double in that game. Who else? A couple infield hits between Pages and Freddie Freeman. Pages, I think, had a home run in the first inning. They will go for the series win tonight. Roki Sasaki, Brian Wu. No recap for that game. All right. I won't really have the time, unfortunately, but I will be back this weekend to recap the Dodgers and the Red Sox. A lot of things going on for me right now, unfortunately, as you can see behind me. But, yeah, let's do the trade deadline stuff. So I'm going to talk about a lot of different topics today. Really just all the things that transpire with the Dodgers. And, most importantly, what I'm going to talk about is candidates, potential players the Dodgers could acquire, guys that make sense. We're going to talk about all aspects of the team. So starting pitching, the bullpen, any kind of offensive players, some hitters that they could acquire, actually some catcher stuff as well, because we know Will Smith has been injured, and we'll kind of go in order from least important to most juicy, and I will save the juicy stuff from that guy from Detroit until the very end. But I'm also going to talk about some prospect stuff and just really a lot of the things that are kind of trending right now and going on in the world of the Dodgers, things that are being reported, and a lot of opinions from Dodger fans out there that I've been seeing. So first of all, trade deadline stuff, okay? I did this last year, and I just want people to remember, what should you remember about the trade deadline? The deadline is all about urgency and desperation. Okay, it is the last chance a general manager has, an organization has, to add to their team down the stretch, down into a pennant race. So really, I don't know when in sports the trade deadline became a thing. It really is such a cool thing when you think about it. You can address where your team is at and say, hey, we need help in this aspect of our team. Let's go out and try to acquire that mid-season. Kind of a beautiful thing, and it's the greatest thing for fans and stuff. It creates so much excitement. But, I've said this before. I remember giving this exact same speech a year ago when I talked about the deadline. So many fans, I feel like, not just Dodger fans, but all fans, whenever it's around deadline season and I feel like your team has a bad loss, like you blow a game late or you get embarrassed or your team is playing bad, so many fans I see hop on Twitter and say, this is ridiculous and we need to acquire, by the time this deadline is done, we need to acquire 2 bats, 3 relievers, a starter, like all these things. And I just always say, like, you need to keep your expectations realistic with the deadline. Like I said, one of the biggest things that, transpires with the deadline is it's all about urgency and desperation. So what you're dealing with is other teams who need the same thing as you. So there's only so many players that can go around. So I just always think it's crazy when fans go into the deadline expecting like an entirely new roster. Okay, there's competition between other teams. There's only so many players to go around, and it's almost impossible, like I said, to remake your whole team. So it's not unfair to have expectations. Certain clubs need to make moves and need, have more pressure on them per se to make additions. But, I just feel like that's something that I always need to talk about because I just think it's crazy sometimes the way fans expect like just the crazy amount of moves to improve your team. And especially in this case as Dodger fans. Okay. Now me personally as a fan, I feel like I've watched baseball for a long time and I kind of understand how it works. And I feel like I try to keep realistic options. Like you can expect your team, the Dodgers, to make some moves, a move or two to try to get better, but you got to keep things in perspective. The Dodgers have the best record in baseball, first place in the NL West, like 10-game lead on the Padres. They're going to be a postseason team, probably will win the division as long as they can just, avoid like a big fall like they did last year where they let the Padres get back into the race. But, the Dodgers have the best offense in baseball, the best lineup, one of the best starting pitching groups in baseball, pretty solid bullpen. Like, when you're a good team like this who has so many expensive players on your roster, it's hard to, go into the deadline and think you got to make a bunch of moves. The Dodgers aren't really in a position where they need to make a lot of moves, but what makes them so interesting and, they got to have you got to give them a lot of credit for where they're at organizationally is that they're kind of in a scenario where they can make any move that they do want, regardless of what they kind of need or don't need. So what do the Dodgers actually need at the deadline? A starting pitcher, a right-handed bat in the lineup, maybe some relief help, maybe even a catcher. Okay, I've seen a lot of that, like I said, with the Will Smith scenario. I'm going to get to all that stuff. Okay, what I'm going to start with is some of the things that have been reported as of late, some things that actually don't surprise me. Could they actually sell some pieces and create some room for some prospects or bring in more prospects? So what I mean by that is the Dodgers are not, it's not uncommon for them to actually trade away some pieces at the deadline or make some moves that you might not necessarily expect. Like, in your normal fan mind, you always think, well, at the deadline, if you're a team that's a contender, you're going to be looking to add. You're not really going to trade pieces away or worry about like acquiring prospects or anything like that. But this current Dodgers farm system, 2026, this might be the best farm system we've ever seen from the Dodgers. It is absolutely loaded with top-end prospects and top-end talent. And, it's not uncommon for the Dodgers in the last, I'd say, decade, maybe a little bit over that. It's not uncommon for the Dodgers to be a perennial playoff team and have a good farm system, right? Because you go back 10 years ago, who were some highly touted prospects that came up for the Dodgers while they were in the midst of making the playoffs every year? Cody Bellinger. Corey Seager was the top prospect in baseball. Julio Urias was a highly touted prospect. Jock Peterson. Other guys as well. Will Smith was a pretty highly touted prospect. Gavin Lux. Walker Buehler. They should be given a lot of credit for a perennial playoff team. So that means, obviously, with the way the draft works, you're picking at the end of the first round, the end of all the rounds every single year, and it's not normal to be a perennial playoff team that picks that late in the draft and always have a loaded farm system. You have to have very smart people in place to pick certain draft picks, to pick the right people, and create a farm system like that because it's not easy, right? A lot of teams when you see these teams that have loaded farm systems, like right now, the Chicago White Sox, or, over the years, like the Astros stockpile draft picks, top prospects. The Cubs, the White Sox, all these teams have done, a lot of teams, the Orioles have knocked it down. We know what it took for a lot of those teams was to trade away a ton of pieces, basically be bad, get a lot of top 5 picks in the draft, and load up. The Dodgers have done nothing like that, okay? So, it's really an anomaly when it comes to the prospects and being that consistent in terms of having a loaded farm system. Okay, it really speaks to how well they are run, and they're probably the best well-run organization in baseball. When it comes to the exact prospects right now, the guys that are in the farm system that have made a lot of noise and are getting a lot of people very excited. Okay, so a year ago, the Dodgers actually made some trades that brought in some prospects. They got James Tibbs III, who is a prospect originally drafted by the Giants in the first round, I believe, traded to the Red Sox in the Devers trade. Dodgers traded him for Dustin May, first-round draft pick from 2024. He is currently raking down in the minor leagues. A little bit of an older prospect, not young, not like really, really old, but like, it's time for him to get to the big leagues. They got him for Dustin May, and then they got Adam Serwinowski. That was also in a trade with the Rays. Those guys are both top 12 in the Dodgers system, and the Dodgers have the second best farm system in baseball, so top 12 are pretty good players, okay? The Dodgers currently have 5 players in the top 25 in all of baseball. So of the 100 top-ranked prospects in the entire sport, the Dodgers have 5 of the top 25. Okay, the outfield specifically is where they're incredibly loaded. They have so many top prospects that are outfielders right now. I'm sure you know these names, but Jose De Paula, Mike Sirota, Eduardo Quintero, Zaire Hope, Charles Davalin. I'm sorry, I just learned about him recently. And then James Tibbs III. All those guys are top 25. All 6 of those guys are in the top 100. They're not all those guys are top 25. DePaula, Sirota, Quintero, Hope, and then the shortstop prospect they have I didn't mention. He's also in the top 25. Okay, and almost all of those guys are knocking on the door for 2027. Okay, so to me personally, they have 3 untouchables, 3 guys that I would not include in any trades. Tarik Skubal, Mason Miller, whatever you want to talk about, any kind of big players. Jose De Paula, Mike Sirota, and Quintero. Those guys, to me, young guys, especially De Paula is only 21, and then Quintero is only 19. De Paula and Sirota are like knocking on the door. They should be in the big leagues by 2027. Quintero is a little bit more away, longer time away because he's younger. Those 3 guys, the way they play the game right now in the minor leagues, incredible power, plate discipline, athleticism. I know that De Paula is going to have some concerns about what position he plays in the future, but he is at least like athletic and can run, steal bases. Sirota, incredible plate discipline. Incredible bat, crazy plate discipline with power, great defense in center field, whether he ends up in center or right or left. But he can run, play the field, and his bat, the plate discipline, him and De Paula especially. Okay, DePaul and Sirota have a chance to be superstars. DePaul just turned 21 years old, OPS over 900 in AA. Sirota is also in AA, just turned 23 years old. His OPS is over 1,000, and his on-base percentage is .474. He nearly has a 500 on base. That is ridiculous. Those guys are 2 elite prospects that have such elite plate discipline. Their process at the plate with the power is incredible. The other guys that I mentioned earlier, like James Tibbs, Zaire Hope, those guys almost become expendable and could be moved to facilitate some other good trades because there's almost like running out of room for those guys. So I just wanted to talk about the farm system and how loaded it is. And I've never been traditionally like a huge prospect guy. I obviously prospects are a massive part of today's game, but nowadays as fans, the average fan becomes way more knowledgeable about prospects and players down in the minor leagues, and there's way more numbers and things to track on them to be kind of more sure about how good they could possibly, although nothing, of course, is set in stone. Right now, basically the 2 best players on the New York Yankees right now, I know Judge is injured, but the 2 best players on the Yankees this year have been Cam Schlittler, Ben Rice. Neither one of them were highly touted prospects or first-round picks. I think they both were drafted after the 10th round or something like that. So it just shows that nothing is set in stone. Mookie Betts is going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. He was drafted in the 4th round, I want to say. So there is no like set in stone thing. But nowadays, the average fan is way more knowledgeable about prospects. And so a lot of fans and a lot of people overall are like kind of more prospect huggers is what, that term. Like, you can't trade this guy. You can't trade that guy. You got to be, I don't usually get too wrapped up in prospects. When they get to the big leagues, obviously I know about them and I've been excited, but I don't get like overly excited. But I'll be honest, Mike Sirota, Josue DePaula, I am so excited to see those guys play. Like, I almost want the Dodgers to figure out how they're going to get those guys into the, plans going forward in 2027. Because they're both outfielders. DePaula might end up being a DH at some point, but he's so young that, you would think he could play left field. Sirota looks like he could be a great center fielder with that bat. And we know right now they got a crowded outfield. Shohei Ohtani is the DH. Freddie Freeman plays first. Like, they're going to have to figure some things out in the near future, but the Dodgers do have the oldest roster in Major League Baseball. So, at some point, that like Freddie Freeman's not that long away from being done in his career. Mookie Betts is getting older. Shohei Ohtani's 32 years old. Like, he's not necessarily, he's not in his 20s anymore. He's in like the smack dab middle of his prime. Max Muncy's 35 years old. The team's not really that young anymore. So, you want to keep this train moving. You got to bring in young players at some point, and they have obviously a loaded farm system. But what I really wanted to talk about as well, could they trade away some players to bring in even more prospects? That's like we said earlier with Tibbs last year and the left-handed pitcher from Tampa Bay. The Dodgers are not prone to do, or not, it's not uncommon for them to do things like that. So there have been multiple reports that have talked about Eric Lauer and Alex Call. All right, interesting. So Alex Call, obviously a bench bat. Right now in the trade deadline world, there is a really high demand for right-handed bats. Okay, but there is a low amount of players out there. So the Dodgers could actually look into possibly trading someone like Alex Call for someone out there who might be desperate and might need a right-handed bat or a bench player. He's played pretty well for them this season. Eric Lauer has obviously played incredible since coming over from the Blue Jays. He pitched great last night, 6 shutout innings against the Mariners. His ERA is 2.96 since joining the Dodgers. Could they kind of like, it's kind of crazy to think, but like, because you normally hear this with teams that are trying to rebuild or cash in. They know they're not going to be on the playoffs, so they kind of cash in on a certain player that's played well. Could the Dodgers cash in on the last 2 months of Eric Lauer to trade him to a team that needs starting pitching? All right, because another thing I didn't talk about earlier with some of these injuries, we know Edwin Diaz just came back. Blake Snell just finished off, and I'll get into this later when we talk about starting pitching stuff. Snell just finished his 3rd rehab assignment last night, struck out 9. Looked great. Very close. He's got to be close. Within the next 2 weeks or so, he should be activated. He might make one more rehab. Sorry, I didn't check Twitter if that's been announced yet, but might make one more rehab assignment. Could even make that 4th, what was supposed to be his 4th rehab, could even be at the big leagues. I wouldn't be shocked for that. Okay, he is close to returning. Tyler Glasnow just threw to live hitters at Dodger Stadium for the 2nd time. So he is within the next week. Will be going on a rehab assignment. And like I said, they just got Edwin Diaz back. And, at some point you're looking ahead and thinking the rotation could be getting more healthy. Could Eric Lauer become, kind of expendable where you could kind of cash in and trade him to a team? And he's pitched very well as of late. So that's something the Dodgers could do. Same thing with Alex Call. There's even been some talk. I don't think it's been reports that the Dodgers are trying to do this or shopping this player. But Teoscar Hernandez, if you actually remember this past offseason, there was a little bit of talk of that. The Dodgers could trade Teoscar Hernandez. Like I said, they have the surplus of minor league players, minor league outfielders that are these prospects that are going nuts right now for the Dodgers. Could you trade away someone like Teoscar Hernandez for a team that is looking for a right-handed bat? Like I said, so many teams are looking for right-handed bats right now. Could you trade away a guy like Teoscar Hernandez? Because, again, the demand for right-handed bats, there's a lot of demand. It's highly in demand. Dodgers could kind of use that to their advantage where they could trade away Teoscar to get some kind of prospects. The only, thing about that, the only debate about that is the Dodgers themselves kind of need a right-handed bat, so I don't know how smart that would be. But it is something to look into because, like I said, DePaula and Sirota are so good and so exciting. It wouldn't be crazy to me to think that you could trade away Teoscar to kind of clear up some playing time for those guys at some point, but they're really not fully on the cusp yet. They still are both in Double A, so they have yet to play it in Triple A. Probably will both finish the year in Triple A. Okay, but it's something to look into. Teoscar is a little bit of an older player now. We know that his defense. Shout out to him. He made an amazing play last night, but we know not the most nimble of defenders. And if this year continues where he kind of just has another league average, slightly above season. A little injury prone. The first 2 years of this contract of him have been a little underwhelming, a little injury prone. Could another team that needs right-handed bat, the Seattle Mariners, the Philadelphia Phillies, could they look and say, hey, we need a guy that can hit left-handed pitching, that can, a right-handed outfielder, and could they take him from the Dodgers and, take some money off the Dodgers payroll? Maybe the Dodgers would express calling up James Tibbs to platoon with Alex Call in left field. That would be very interesting because of how good that guy can hit. All interesting things to keep an eye on. I would not be surprised if the Dodgers would make a little bit of these small trades, like trade away Eric Lauer, trade away someone like Alex Call. Teoscar would be a big move, so it would be interesting to see what the return would be and where he'd be being sent to and all that stuff. But all interesting little things that I thought about before we actually get into the nitty-gritty. So let's go through this for real and see what the Dodgers could acquire and what is actually out there. I didn't do what I did last year and come up with fake trades. You'll see why in a second. There is kind of no exact area the Dodgers need to address. Last year they really needed to address the bullpen, maybe a bat. So it was kind of easy to come up with some fake trades. This year there's not really an exact, player or exact acquisition, need that they have to go out and address. So I didn't really come up with any fake trades. I really just came up with candidates. So we'll start with the bullpen. All right. Dodgers bullpen has gotten really healthy. They are 14th right now in bullpen ERA. All right. It's been one of the few inconsistencies for this team, right? We know the starting pitching has been great all year. The lineup for the most part has been great all year. The second half, it hasn't been as hot, but we know, they have the highest team OPS in baseball. So, the lineup's been great. The bullpen, though, down to 14th. They haven't been as great as late. So that's been one of the few inconsistencies if you wanted to nitpick. But again, the few guys that have struggled for the Dodgers are guys that just got back from injury. Diaz, who I know gave up a couple runs last night, so I don't mean struggled in one game. I mean, we know before he went on the IL, he struggled. Evan Phillips has also struggled since he's came off. Those are two guys that we're all confident that Diaz is going to go back to being the Dodgers closer, and Evan Phillips is going to be a high leverage arm for them. Okay. They also have a really balanced bullpen to me. Like you got Vesia and Scott, your two high leverage guys that are left-handed guys. Then you got Edgardo Henriquez, Evan Phillips, I think, at some point. Will Klein, a few other guys, right-handed pitchers that have pitched really well. So I think that the bullpen is really balanced. They got strikeouts. They have guys, I think the bullpen as a whole is really solid. You can never have enough bullpen, and teams are always trying to look for bullpen help, even the teams that already have good bullpens. That's really one of the easiest things for teams to look to add to when it comes to the trade deadline. But I just think, they're set on this is the bullpen they have right now for October, especially when you consider that Sasaki and or Wroblewski, are probably going to be added to that bullpen at some point. So this bullpen is very deep, a lot of great arms, a lot of great velocity, strikeout stuff. They have one of the lower home run per nines in the game, which was not the case last year. They're much more healthy now. Again, you could go out and acquire someone, probably a right-handed reliever, as insurance. They do have some injury-prone guys like Brock Stewart, who I didn't mention a second ago, who's kind of been slowly becoming a big piece for them. That guy is so injury prone. So you might need to acquire somebody in case of an injury. But I just think that, again, they look at their bullpen and believe in this bullpen. And I believe in the bullpen. Jack Dreyer, Edgardo Henriquez, Will Klein. Those guys are fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh inning option guys. Before you even get to Diaz in the ninth, Vesia and Scott in the eighth, in the seventh, and the eighth, and then Phillips potentially, Edgardo Henriquez. So I think this bullpen is very great. Of course, the Dodgers will do their due diligence. There are a couple names out there that are interesting. A couple Mets, AJ Minter, Brooks Raley, who I always forget how to say this guy's name. Huascar, Huascar Brozaban from the Mets, right-hander Anthony Senzatella, Andrew Kittredge, Riley O'Brien, JoJo Romero, old friend from last year, Kirby Yates, probably don't want to see him, Yennier Cano, Kenley Jansen, old friend, Kyle Finnegan, Emilio Pagan. I don't really have them in on the some of the other higher leverage guys like Luke Weaver and Mason Miller. So it'll be interesting to see if they acquire someone. I think that if they do, it might be on the level of last year, like Brock Stewart, a nice ad, but nothing crazy. So I wanted to talk about backup catcher, maybe just catcher in general. But we know that the last couple of months, with the Will Smith injury, Dalton Rushing getting a lot of playing time. I have seen a lot of people on X and stuff like that concerned that the Dodgers might need to acquire a catcher. If I think that's a little bit weird. Now, if you personally feel like they need it because Dalton Rushing isn't good enough, I disagree with that, and I don't, agree. If you feel like what they need to do is go out and acquire a real backup catcher, preferably someone that hits right-handed. Right now they have Elizer Alfonso, who came up from the minor leagues, who's a switch hitter, so he does hit right-handed. And he's been fine as a backup catcher. If you feel like they need to go out and acquire a right-handed hitter in the possibility that Will Smith doesn't come back, again, I can understand all of those things. Like, let's say in the world Will Smith didn't come back and this neck issue just became like, he's not going to come back this year. Obviously, Rushing is a very streaky hitter. So if the postseason comes along and Rushing is the catcher, it would be nice to think that you could have a veteran backup catcher that can hit right-handed and handle left-handed pitching and play solid defense as a safety net for Dalton Rushing. But I just, I've seen some people who like Will Smith has been injured, so they got to go out and get a catcher. Like, I think that's, again, like a little bit of an overreaction. Not every team can lose a top 5 catcher in baseball, which is Will Smith. Coming into this year, he was top 2 behind Cal Raleigh. Not every team can have lose that catcher, and their backup catcher has an OPS over 800 in the starter's absence. Okay, I mean, again, you can argue that you might want a different backup catcher over Elizer Alfonso, like I said, specifically a right-handed catcher, and I'll listen to that. But if you're trying to make the argument that they need to replace Rushing has an OPS over 800, and I'm sure that if you did some favorable timelines and cut out early on this year when he started off hot, the numbers wouldn't look as great. But regardless, he has an OPS over 800. He's got a lot of pop. He handles the pitching staff fine. He's a pretty decent thrower from behind the plate. Like, he's a young, very talented catcher. If he ends up being the starting catcher because Will Smith can't come back, I'm fine with that. Rushing is great. So, but I will listen, and again, if you wanted to, the Dodgers to go out and acquire some backup catchers, I do have a list of some guys. Jake Rogers of the Tigers was just DFA'd. He is the personal catcher of Tarik Skubal, so that would be very interesting if the Dodgers claimed him. Right-handed hitting catcher who in the past has been a good offensive catcher. He's a little bit older now, so not so much, but, that's an option. Christian Vasquez still plays solid defense for the Astros. Victor Carantini, who is currently with the Twins, is actually still a pretty solid offensive catcher who has some good defensive numbers. That would be pretty interesting. Jose Trevino of the Reds, really great defensive catcher in the past, who has been able to handle left-handed pitching. This would be the guy to me that if they got, or I would go after the most. Luis Torrens of the New York Mets. He's their backup catcher, right-handed hitting catcher, one of the better defensive catchers in the game. He can throw. I think he's the best thrower in the game, and he also frames really well and blocks well. So he's a fantastic defensive catcher. That would be fantastic to pair with Rushing. All right, Pedro Pajes, backup catcher for the Cardinals. I don't know about that. Jonah Heim is someone that's likely going to be traded, switch hitter for the Athletics right now. Personally, I would love Torrens or Carantini because Carantini can handle the bat, veteran, and then Torrens is a fantastic defensive catcher. So, maybe like a week ago or so, or 2 weeks ago, it was more likely that they were going to acquire a catcher. But we also just got a good update on Will Smith. He is pain-free from his neck. He's resumed baseball activity. Still not really a timeline, but it does look like he's definitely going to come back like we always thought, but now it looks a little bit more clear. So I just think like that just kind of puts it in a, that continues the rushing's been pretty solid. You got Alfonso as the backup, and we'll just ride this out until Will Smith returns. But it is something interesting, and again, they can go out and acquire someone. In my mind, you would have to acquire someone, not have to, but like you kind of have to acquire someone that like you can DFA again or send down or something like that. If you bring in Luis Torrens, who plays fantastic defense, well, if Will Smith returns, are you gonna send Dalton Rushing down? Are you gonna keep 3 catchers on the on the system on the roster? Jake Rogers would make some sense if you got Skubal, his personal catcher, or just because he's a legit backup catcher, and you could DFA him right when Will Smith comes back. Ultimately, I think they're not going to go acquire a catcher. I don't really see that. But it is something possible. Like I said, Luis Torrens would be great because of how great his defense is. But, at the end of the day, man, your starting catcher right now has an OPS over 800, which would probably be top 5 in baseball. And your backup catcher is your backup catcher. He's a switch-hitting catcher who looks fine. So what are you going to do? Okay, let's go to the lineup, which is, acquiring a bat and the possibility of the Dodgers bringing in an offensive player. Okay, this would be the most likely outcome to me. Now, with those, with that said, it would be specific type of bat, nothing major. Okay, so I don't think that they are in the, sweepstakes of acquiring a shortstop or a big-time outfield bat or a first baseman, obviously. The Dodgers are tied for the highest team OPS in baseball and 4th most runs. There isn't really any need for more offense. There isn't really much wiggle room in the lineup. Okay, look up and down the lineup. You got Freddie Freeman at first base. You got Mookie Betts playing shortstop. You're not doing anything with him, even though we know, the season he's had. Andy Pa has played center field. You got Kyle Tucker. We know he's been disappointing, but you're not going to move off of Kyle Tucker. You got Max Muncy at third, who's been fantastic. You got, Rushing, who's behind the plate now. Will Smith will be back. You got Shohei as the DH. Tommy Edman has been fantastic since coming off the IL. He's become the, everyday second baseman for the most part. You don't really have any wiggle room in there. The only wiggle room would be some sort of, someone that could play outfield, left field, and because the Dodgers do have a lot of left-handed hitters in the lineup, they are kind of in that need with a lot of teams in baseball of a right-handed bat. But the problem, like I said, is that there are so many teams that are in need of a right-handed bat. That is the number one most difficult thing to find right now on the market this year. Okay, there are certain guys out there who aren't even massive names, like Taylor Ward of the Orioles. Who's the outfielder for the Kansas City Royals? I'm blanking on his name right now. Right-handed hitter. He's going to be in high demand. Like some players that aren't even close to all-star players are going to be in high demand because there's not really a lucrative amount, a lot of right-handed bats. So to me, the best fit is some sort of utility/bench bat. Somebody similar to Alex Call. Again, they could be creative and trade away Alex Call and then acquire another player or two. But, to me, the Dodgers like their offense. Their offense is great, and they don't really have a lot of wiggle room, so I don't really see them acquiring anyone big, but they could definitely acquire some sort of right-handed bat. Spencer Steer of the Reds, he just went on the injured list, probably was the most perfect fit for the Dodgers. He plays first base. He's played some infield, third base, left field, right field, like DH kind of bat who can hit left-handed pitching very well, right-handed hitter. He would have been a solid fit, but he just went on the IL. Okay, so I did some research, and I looked up right-handed hitters that can hit left-handed pitching. So I did come up with some names, but spoiler, none of them are sexy, and there's probably a lot that you don't even know if you're a casual fan. So Andrew Monasterio, infielder for the Boston Red Sox. Unlikely that they would even trade him because he's playing well for them, and they are a team that needs offense, and they are trying to stay in the race. They just got themselves back in the playoff picture. He crushes left-handed pitching. He would be an option. Okay, somebody that you could possibly like platoon with Muncy if he struggled with left-handed pitching, which he doesn't. Maybe move Tommy Edman to left and play him at second base. That would be an option, something like that. Little bit of a weird name, excuse me. Heriberto Hernandez of the Marlins. I'm not familiar with his game until recently. Outfielder for the Marlins who has 15 home runs and also is crushing left-handed pitching. So the Marlins there's been some reports they're willing to move some players, as they always are. That would be an interesting option. Joe Adele of the Angels crushes left-handed pitching. Nick Lofton, utility player for the Kansas City Royals. I could actually see that because he's a utility guy. That is something I could see. Jose Fermin of the St. Louis Cardinals, interesting player as well. That could be an option. Matt Verling of the Detroit Tigers, right-handed bat who crushes lefties. And then Jacob Young of the Washington Nationals has solid numbers against left-handed pitching, and he's actually one of the better defensive players in the game as a center fielder for the Nationals. Okay, literally, like I said, 0 sexy names, but that's where the Dodgers are at. They're not really going to be in that sweepstakes of, if Byron Buxton was available or something crazy like that. It's really going to make some sense because if you take a look at the Dodgers bench right now, and their lineup is what it is, right? Their normal lineup. Let's say it's against a right-handed pitcher. Their bench is going to consist of, let's say Will Smith comes back, Rushing on the bench, Miguel Rojas on the bench, probably Kike on the bench, and then Alex Call. It might not even be a right-handed bat. It could potentially be a left-handed bat off the bench. Someone like James Tibbs makes a lot of sense as someone that could play some left field, platoon with Teoscar potentially if he doesn't really turn it around soon, and then be a left-handed bat because Rushing could potentially be a pinch hit bat in the postseason, but he's also your backup catcher. So, if you use him, you could lose your backup catcher. So, what the Dodgers really need is for Mookie Betts and Teoscar Hernandez to start hitting as two right-handed hitters. Because when you look at their bench, they have right-handed options. They have pinch hit options in Miguel Rojas, Kike Hernandez, and Alex Call. But what they could use is some right-handed bats in the actual lineup. But obviously, the only guy you could trade is Teoscar Hernandez, and I don't know if the Dodgers are going to do that. So what they really need is to acquire Mookie Betts and Teoscar Hernandez of 2 years ago. So, that's going to be the difficult part, especially with, like I said, everyone's looking for a right-handed bat. So the Dodgers might have to get creative. They might acquire, just like they did with Alex Call last year, they might acquire somebody that you didn't necessarily hear of to kind of help out the roster. But some interesting names there. Hernandez from the Marlins, Jacob Young, those guys would interest me. Have some kind of realistic options. Nick Lofton of the Royals, interesting. So we'll see. But really, it's time to get into, the topic that we're really here to talk about, the hottest topic of this entire trade deadline, not just the Dodgers. But the question is, will the Dodgers actually trade for Tarik Skubal, the back-to-back Cy Young Award winner of the Detroit Tigers, the best pitcher in the sport? He did have the surgery this year, the microscopic surgery on his elbow, and, he was injured for about 2 months. So, you could say, maybe not the best pitcher in baseball this year, but given the fact that he won the last 2 Cy Youngs and he still has very incredible numbers in 90 innings pitched this year, he has as good an argument as anyone for the best pitcher in baseball. So let me break this all down because I got to be honest. I don't think I've ever seen this much smoke around the Dodgers acquiring a player that they don't necessarily need. So it's very interesting. We all know the Dodgers are always aggressive. They are always in conversation for the big stars. Honestly, almost every big star. When there's a big player in free agency, the trade deadline, they are always in the conversation. They always are kind of right there, whether you think they're going to get them or not. But it's kind of shocking to me how many people are talking like this is inevitable. That's kind of crazy. There are a lot of people who seem to believe, I think when the dust settles Monday afternoon, Tarik Skubal will be a Dodger. And, like I said earlier, with the organizational depth they've created with the farm system and just really how aggressive they've been overall with acquiring players, it really speaks to how well they have set up this organization. Like I said, with the prospect capital earlier. And, it's crazy that they could even pull something like this off. I don't know if Skubal will actually wind up a Dodger, and I'm going to break this down, but it really seems like if Andrew Friedman wants him, if he wants Skubal, he can get him. It really seems like if Skubal doesn't end up a Dodger Monday, it's just because Friedman didn't really seem to make the move or didn't really have enough incentive, motivation to go get him. Now, let me say this. I don't think the Dodgers need Skubal. If the deadline passes Monday and he's not a Dodger, which is still very likely, I will not be disappointed for a second because I think this Dodger team is very, very good. I actually still think they've yet to get super nuclear hot like they're capable of. Now, the last couple seasons in the second half, they never really have gotten hot like they used to in the past. So I don't know if that's coming. They might be, win a series here, lose a series here for the rest of the second half, and they'll just be like a 98-win team again and then really turn it on in the postseason. But this is a very well-rounded team. Veterans, some young pieces, mostly veterans, but superstars, fantastic starting pitching, deep bullpen, great offense, one of the better defensive Dodger teams in a long time. So when Monday passes and Skubal is potentially not a Dodger, which I would still probably lean that way, I will not be disappointed for a second because I think this team's fantastic. And I wouldn't even mind if Skubal went to another team. I think it'd be good for the sport to see him go over someone like Milwaukee or Tampa Bay. But, I just want to clarify some things because I've seen a lot. There is so much debate about this. This goes deeper than just the Dodgers and trying to acquire a good player because there is so much conversation about the Dodgers. Are they good for baseball? Are they bad for baseball? Potential lockout this offseason with the collective bargaining agreement expiring and, all the money the Dodgers spend and how aggressive they are. And, they've won the last 2 World Series, and a lot of fans think, is it unfair? And blah, 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 blah. This goes way deeper than just Tarik Skubal is a good player. I would be extremely ecstatic if they acquire Skubal. It would be like 2021 all over again when they acquired Scherzer and Trey Turner, or 2023 when they signed Ohtani, or 2018 when they acquired Manny Machado. Like, whatever words you want to use, it would be very, very exciting. It'd probably be up there with Scherzer and Trey Turner. But I do want it to be known that they don't need Skubal. And I think that there's been a lot of Dodger fans I have seen on social media that almost kind of like try to justify how they need Skubal or blah, blah, blah. And again, I don't think it's like unfair or it guarantees them the World Series or they're ruining baseball even if they get Skubal. But I've seen a lot of Dodgers fans that are like, well, we don't know what's going to happen with the collective bargaining agreement this year. We might not play baseball in 2027. Who knows? Which I don't think is going to happen, but it's on the board. So because of that, we got to go for it. You got to go for the kill shot. You got to go get the big white whale and get Skubal and guarantee this three-peat. And a lot of Dodger fans are like, if you're not on that same thinking, then you don't really care. You're this or you're that. And I don't go that far. I think that's a stretch too far. 2 things can be true. The Dodgers can go out and acquire Skubal. It'll be fun. It'll be exciting. It would be, it would make them by far the best team in baseball. But if they don't acquire Skubal, that's fine too. They don't need Skubal. I think that we could all agree. I think that if you don't agree with that, then I don't really know where your thinking is. I don't think they need Skubal. I don't think it's a must. It would be a luxury, I believe. Now, there is definitely a path for the Dodgers kind of needing Skubal more than we might think, and this might be some fans' arguments, no question. All right. Blake Snell, he's only pitched 1 game in Major League Baseball this season for the Dodgers. Tyler Glasnow, he's been injured since early May. Shohei Ohtani is also not just dealing with a knee, but a bicep injury, or bicep soreness, which he dealt with a few weeks ago, but he mentioned that is also part of the reason as to why he's not really pitching right now. And it's not crazy that 1 or 2 of those guys won't be available come October. I feel confident that, Yamamoto will be around. And, if you say you acquired Skubal, it's not possible to think, well, then you could have Yamamoto, you could have Skubal, fill in the blank after that. We don't know about Ohtani. We don't know for sure about Glasnow or Snell. So I guess it comes down to, what do you think, about those pitchers coming back? And what will the Dodgers think? What's going on with Ohtani? Would it be his best to just focus on hitting and getting healthy? All right. But Snell just made his 3rd rehab assignment, like I said earlier. He struck out 9. Glasnow faced hitters for the 2nd time and will probably be pitching a rehab assignment next week. This is just me, I personally think all 4 of those guys will be available. I've always thought that Snell, Glasnow will kind of be on a very similar timeline to what they had, with what happened to them last year. Not timeline, but similar. Like, they will come back and be healthy, and down the stretch will pitch good and get you, feeling good that they're ready to go for October. Now, Glasnow I haven't been as confident because he's had a bunch of different sidetracks and setbacks. Snell, I think he's going to be back for the Dodgers within the next week and a half or 2 weeks. Glasnow, if I had to guess, very end of August, maybe September 1st gets activated. And if you go into the postseason and you have Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Blake Snell, and Tyler Glasnow, those are the 4 guys that won you a World Series a year ago. And you really only need 4 starters in the postseason. And now let's say one of those guys doesn't pitch. And I think the most likely of the 2 is probably, or of the 3, is probably Ohtani and Glasnow, because Glasnow is just like, unfortunately, made of glass and could get injured at any moment. And Ohtani, we don't know right now, because Snell looks like he's about to come back, and we know Yamamoto is pretty durable. So if one of those guys gets injured, let's say Glasnow has another setback. Well, you have Justin Robleski, who has a 2.88 ERA, and if he had to be your 4th starter, there's nothing wrong with that. It would likely be Yamamoto, Ohtani, Snell, Glasnow, or Yamamoto, Snell, Glasnow, Robleski, or like I said, you could substitute Ohtani for Glasnow, or whatever the case may be. And this goes back to earlier what I said about desperation in the very beginning of the pod. I think that when the Tigers call up Andrew Friedman and say, this team just upped their offer. All right, you gotta match it if you want Skubal. All right, the Brewers are giving us more prospects. The Rays, the Yankees, the Phillies, whatever. I personally think when you consider how deep the bullpen is, how deep the bullpen's starting to look, guys coming back from the injured list, maybe even Sasaki, Robleski, or Sheehan will kick to the pen to just make things even more deeper. I just think Friedman will say, I'm just going to roll with the 4 guys that won me a World Series last year. Okay? But I will say that with as much smoke as there is right now, and how much, like, people within the industry, like reporters, Jeff Passan, there's been a lot of reports that are basically saying, like, it's like a 50-50 shot. Like, if he gets traded, it's a great shot. It's to the Dodgers. And it really seems like if they want him, they can go get him. So, to me, it feels like it's a 50-50 shot. Like, I feel like there's a really good shot they get him, but I still feel like there's a really good shot they don't. I know that doesn't really make, that's not really the greatest take, but I really have no idea how this is going to play out. It's kind of fascinating that this is where we are. There has been very conflicting reporting, I will say. There are a lot of people that are like, he is definitely going to go to the Dodgers, and then there's a lot of reports that say the Dodgers are going to do what I mentioned earlier, like trade some minor pieces, get some prospects, maybe acquire a small utility bat or something like that. Maybe a bullpen piece, not really do anything major, just look forward to getting guys healthy. So I really think it just depends how everything plays out. If the Tigers' asking price for Skubal is a lot, maybe a couple other teams back out, like other teams that are looking for pitching, like the Cubs, the Brewers, the Phillies, the Rays, like say those other teams find other avenues because Skubal's asking price is too high. The Dodgers might just be like, you know what? We don't really want to give up any of these guys. We don't need Skubal, blah, blah, blah. But again, maybe the Dodgers feel like Ohtani's injury is a little, there's a little bit of some uncertainty. Glasnow could always get hurt at any point. Let's go out and get him. And there is a fair argument, I've heard a lot of this, to keeping him away from other teams. Because there is a good shot. If he doesn't go to the Tampa Bay Rays, he's going to an NL team. It's either going to be the Phillies, the Brewers, or maybe the Braves, maybe the Cubs. And think about this. If he goes to the Milwaukee Brewers, picture this. You're going to have to face Jacob Mizorowski. You're going to have to face Tarik Skubal and Kyle Harrison. That is as good as it gets when it comes to a comparison to the Dodgers' potential rotation of Ohtani, Glasnow, Snell, and Yamamoto. If he goes to the Atlanta Braves, you have Chris Sale and you have Tarik Skubal back-to-back to deal with. If he goes to the Phillies, you got to deal with Christopher Sanchez, Tarik Skubal, Zach Wheeler, Jesus Luzardo. That is like every night you will get a dominant pitcher just like the Dodgers. So there is a real aspect to that. My ultimate belief in the end, if I had to pick, is like I said earlier, I think in the end, Friedman just says, I'm going to roll with the 4 guys that won me a World Series, especially with these last couple updates about Glasnow and Snell, like looking like they're definitely going to come back. I think what it really depends on is Ohtani. Because I think that in a couple days, if it's like Ohtani's bicep is still not in a great spot, his knee, I think the Dodgers will say, you know what, we got to get Skubal, pair him with Yamamoto, and Ohtani can just be our DH, maybe come out of the bullpen or something crazy like that, whatever. I think that's what it really depends on, because I think we're getting Snell for sure, and I think Glasnow is coming back too. And that gives you at least Yamamoto, Snell, and Glasnow paired with Robleski, who I know, Dodger fans are so spoiled that if we saw Robleski, it's like, oh, no, we can't have Robleski pitching. Every other team in Major League Baseball, outside of like the Yankees and Phillies, basically, with their rotations, if they had a guy pitching with a sub-3 ERA, they are pitching innings for that postseason team probably in the first 2 games. All right, that's the luxury the Dodgers have. So I just saying, like, if Robleski's part of the postseason rotation, it's not the end of the world. I get it. I'll be honest. I would prefer him to not probably pitch because other guys I think would be better. But that is the world we live in. It is going to be an interesting 48, 72 hours. All right, so I will get back on here Sunday to recap the Red Sox and Dodgers series. I'll talk about any trades and any rumors that have gone on. I will see what happens with the Dodgers specifically. I have a baseball podcast for all things baseball called Baseball Mondays. So perfectly, the Deadline Monday, my show takes place every Monday. You could go on there and I will recap everything that's gone on in Major League Baseball, including the Dodgers. If something massive happens like Skubal, I will get on here Monday or Tuesday or whatever and really recap things from a Dodgers perspective, okay, or whenever that trade potentially happens. If nothing really happens, if it's kind of a small deadline, then I'll get on here. It'll be like next Wednesday or something like that to recap whatever that series is, and I'll also give my thoughts on the deadline. So, a lot of conversation there. I hope you guys enjoyed. I gave you guys a lot of info. The Dodgers are in a great spot, I'll be honest. The farm system, where the team is at right now, hopefully they can get the series win tonight with Roki Sasaki on the mound taking on Brian Wu. Get a series win over the Mariners. That would be nice. Keep things rolling. A couple guys that played nice as of late. It looks like Ohtani's close to really getting hot. He's really roasted some balls out to left center and center field as of late. Need Tucker to do something at home. Need Mookie Betts to turn it around. But things look great. The Dodgers are in a pretty solid start. We will see what happens with the trade deadlines. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, you can get this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on all social media at Talking Blue Pod. You can follow myself at Nick Talking Ball on X. I will see you guys in a few short days. Hopefully I can get on here and recap something big. But if not, I'll see you guys Sunday to recap the Red Sox and the Dodgers. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.